All right, guys. So basically, I'm going to do my best to talk about obsession with bodybuilding. I could recall, when I was in my early 20s or even in my teens when I first started this sport, it was bodybuilding 24/7. It was, eating, breathing, sleeping, everything I did all kind of revolved around bodybuilding. And I would say that, it's not a bad thing to be passionate and be driven, because that's something that I definitely was and still am. There's a reason why I'm still doing this, almost 32 years later. I have a passion for it, I have a love for it, and I'm definitely driven. I'm motivated, but more importantly than motivation, I'm committed, because I think, motivation comes and goes, but being committed is kind of like that engine and that fuel that's kept me going all these years. But yeah, I think, for many of us, I think we all can relate that, in this sport that we do think about it quite a lot. And I can recall back, when I first started, working in the auto plant in my early 20s, back then the internet didn't exist. So it wasn't, about me, let's say, reading a bunch of articles on the internet, or watching or listening to a bunch of podcasts, or looking at social media, and just basically trying to absorb as much bodybuilding as I can, as we see nowadays with the internet. But back then, it was reading magazines. But obviously when you're at work, you can't be reading magazines. Well, you shouldn't be anyways, you should be working. So it was just more, me just kind of thinking about bodybuilding. Working at an auto plant, working on an assembly line, it's kind of robotic, it's a boring job. So you really do have a lot of time to think. So I just recall, like, I would think about, okay, the workout that was to come after work. I'm like, okay, I would visualize how those sets would be, what load I would use, how it was going to feel. So basically there was a lot of visualization and a lot of thinking. A good thing, because obviously, it was motivating. And when I did get to the gym, more times than not, the workout would go according to how I was thinking it during the day. But with as much thinking and with as much, absorption that I had in the sport, I will admit, and not proud of, the fact that it definitely rubbed off on the other parts of my life, the other things, outside of the bodybuilding circle. That would be, at the time, my ex-wife, my family, friends, and even my job. Not to say that I was a bad worker and I didn't get my work done, but then I kind of look back in hindsight and go, maybe I could have really applied more of myself to my job. Maybe I could have moved up in my job a little bit more so, or had more motivation towards, my work, which could have made me an even better worker. So a lot of my focus, looking back in hindsight, was probably geared a little too much on the bodybuilding side of things. And, even, in how I conducted my personal life, everything was based around bodybuilding. So if it was a training day, for example, and I was maybe invited to some function, family function, or a function with friends, or even if my ex-wife wanted to go do something, my first thought was always, no, I can't. I have to train. That's more important. And not only just that type of thing, but also, when I was, around people, I'm pretty sure that the majority of my conversation was on bodybuilding. And, I think if I look back, I'm pretty confident that, some of the people that really weren't involved in the sport probably were like annoyed, or just like, man, that's all this guy talks about is bodybuilding. So I definitely think that, if things aren't in the right perspective, if priorities aren't in the right perspective, this sport can definitely impact those around us. It can impact us in a way to where maybe we're holding ourselves back from other things in life. And that's something that, took me a long time for me personally, as far as my journey goes, to really kind of figure out. And now that, obviously life for me now as a family man, and I'm talking, this is like, 20 years later or more, I can definitely see, that, I definitely missed out on a lot in my 20s and even into my 30s, and I definitely impacted those people around me, probably in not the best of ways. I'm sure, there were some good things about, the way I obsessed on bodybuilding. Like I'm sure, some people might have been inspired. They might have, it might have helped them with their own personal, personal goals or whatever. But I do think that the way I am now, as far as the maturity level, and as far as the balance aspect of putting my priorities in order, like my family and my wife come first, family, friends, work, that all kind of comes before my own personal bodybuilding journey. Not to say that it's not important to me anymore, because I definitely do think about bodybuilding throughout the day. It's hard not to, being that I am a coach. I do think about bodybuilding, obviously, when I'm working, but it's not so much my own personal journey. It's more about those I coach. And part of my coaching is definitely, trying to instill priorities and balance in the sport. Because, of course, the goal, if I'm getting somebody to the stage, is to get them in their all-time best shape. And yeah, you're going to have to be extreme at times. Just like I am with my journey, I have to be extreme at times because it is an extreme sport to get on a bodybuilding stage. But I try to really instill doing it in a way to where the priorities are always in order. And, at the moment, now that I'm a little less than 6 weeks out from my first show of the season, as far as, my first competitive show, I did a guest posing a couple weeks back. And, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I really needed to dial in the prep, like really sacrifice some of the things that I was doing in life that was affecting the prep. So there was some things that I was a little bit loose on, like weekends, being a little more social, having a glass of wine or two with my wife and things like that. So I really needed to buckle down and get a little bit more on point, a little more obsessed, if you will. So there's a lot more thought process going into it. And of course, knowing that I needed to buckle down like that, I did let my wife know. I had that conversation. Okay, babe, I gotta buckle down here. So it means I'm gonna have to sacrifice a little bit more. So I wanted to make her aware of what I was doing, so she fully understood what was gonna be going on. So I think it's important to communicate these things, with my wife, with family, and other people that it might affect, so they understand, why I'm doing it and the reasoning behind it all. But I will say that because of that, the focus on bodybuilding, like I became even more hyper focused. And I've noticed, like about a week ago, I noticed that some of the family things, my personal life, some of that was getting, a little too far, like a little too much being put on the back burner. So Saturday, this past Saturday, I wanted to make, we had a concert to go to, my wife and I. So I made it a point that was like our day. That was not about bodybuilding. That was our day. And I really wanted to not obsess on bodybuilding, not even obsess about, I'm going out to a concert. How am I going to manage food and all that? I really wanted to make sure that when I was with my wife, for that event, like my attention, my focus was not on bodybuilding. I wanted to make sure that, she had 100% of me. And I think, that is really important. And so that's basically what I did. Was I really kind of set things up in advance to make sure that I was not focused on bodybuilding. And because I was pretty successful in doing that, we had a really good time at the concert, and we became even more connected than we already are. And I think, as a family and as a a couple, it's important that we both understand that we're the glue that holds the family together. So we definitely wanted to make sure that our bond is pretty tight. That way, our family stays tight. So it's important to me as a competitive bodybuilder, 6 weeks out, super hyper focused, that it was okay to let go of the thought of bodybuilding for one day. So it keeps, my life in harmony, because if my life is in harmony, then it makes bodybuilding that much easier. I think often, we get so caught up, even myself, I'm guilty of this. I get so caught up in, being on social media, whether I'm trying to learn more about the sport or just being entertained by the sport or following other people. I guess in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, if you're noticing that you're so absorbed in bodybuilding, you're spending hours and hours and hours thinking about it, absorbing it, think about, your family, your loved ones, significant other. Ask yourself, are you thinking about them more or less than bodybuilding? And I think, if you can truthfully answer that, you might be able to maybe enhance, both sides of the world, as far as the bodybuilding world, and maybe more importantly, your life outside of the sport. And again, if you can create harmony with both, I think you're going to end up being a far better and far happier bodybuilder, but more importantly, I should say, a human.